So good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm very happy to be here today. Today I will be presenting you this joint work which I developed with Vincenzo Moscati and Fiévet and Alex de Carvalho, which, as you can see, is entitled Really He Dazed the Cat to the Boy, 2 years old, exploit grammatical and thematic content to infer novel verb meaning. So, let me start by giving you a little bit of background. Our research stems back from the hypothesis of syntactic bootstrapping, so basically from the idea that toddlers, and in particular 2 years olds, can learn the meaning of new verbs by paying attention to the syntactic context in which those verbs are found. For instance, in this influential work by Yoon and Fisher, what the authors did was to present their participant, 2 years olds, with a dialogue in which a novel verb, blicking, was used either in transitive sentences, such as Jane blicked the baby, or in intransitive ones, such as simply Jane blicked. And after the dialogue phase, they presented a test phase in which a causative video was contrasted to an activity video. In one case, there were 2 participants which were engaging in a joint novel action. In the other case, only 1 participant was performing a novel action. What we observe is that indeed toddlers in the transitive condition prefer to look at the causative video with 2 participants. So these and similar results tell us that in presence of the new verbs, children can infer something about these meanings from the words it is surrounded by. However, there may be, let's say, very different interpretation about what exact strategy children are exploiting in cases like this. The simplest explanation for these results is that children simply start out by counting the number of nouns that are combined with a certain verb and matching that number with the number of participants that they see in a certain event. So in the present case, in the transitive condition, they hear 2 nouns, Jane, the baby. In the causative video, they saw 2 participants and they simply make the match. And that is indeed a powerful generalization, and we have indication that children may start out by doing that precisely from the kind of mistakes that sometimes children do when the relation between number of nouns and number of participants is less transparent, let's say. For instance, in this study, the authors show that at 21 months, children are not really able to distinguish between a transitive sentence, such as the boy is gorping the girl, and a conjoined subject intransitive one, such as the boy and the girl are gorping. Even though for an adult the syntactic structure and the interpretation is very different, since we have the same number of nouns, children seem to treat both sentences more or less the same, and they connect those sentences to a causal event in which one participant, an agent, let's say, is acting on a patient. And something very similar, or at least, let's say, comparable, was also found in French, where 28-month-olds were found to basically not really distinguish transitive sentences from right dislocating intransitive sentences. So something like il va daser le bébé, with a prosodic break that should signal, according to adult grammar, that the baby is actually co-referential with the subject pronoun, so we have only 1 participant to the action. In this case, once again, children thought that right dislocated sentences actually refer, once again, to a causative action in which 2 characters were engaging. So, indeed, the strategy of counting the number of nouns may be exploited in acquisition, but we have also indication that children can do something different. For instance, in this study, the authors show that in a very comparable age range, English toddlers can discriminate between subject and object noun phrases, because when they are presented with a sentence such as the duck is gorping the bunny, they are able to, let's say, understand that the sentence refers to a video in which the duck is acting on the bunny rather than vice versa, which is something that cannot be reconstructed just paying attention to the number of nouns. So this is probably, in a result like that, children were using something like word order rather. So this kind of results made us think, and make other people think, that children actually from a young age may be able to perform what we may call thematic linking, so linking syntactic position like subject and object to semantic roles like agent and patient. However, let's say the debate remains lively on this issue, and something that we notice is that most works that work on this actually explain sentences which contain one or two noun phrases, but we have very scarce results on sentences which contain 3 noun phrases. So we decided to focus on that, and in particular on the opposition that exists between ditransitive sentences, such as the girl is gulping the cat to the boy, and conjoined object transitive sentences, such as the girl is gulping the cat and the boy. Now, of course, none of you a priori knows what gulping means, but usually Edu speakers has relatively clear-cut intuition about what these sentences may mean. In the ditransitive case, you will probably tend to stick a transfer meaning to the verb, as if it meant giving or sending. While in the transitive case, you will tend to stick rather a causative meaning to the verb, as if it meant hugging or kissing, following. So basically, you would understand that in a conjoined object case, the cat and the boy plays the same role with respect to the action. They are both patients, while in the ditransitive case, they play different roles in a transfer action. So this is what we expect from adult intuition, but can toddlers do the same? Can toddlers also parse ditransitive syntax in order to learn new verbs? We are kind of contrasting evidence in these results, because if let's say, spontaneous production of ditransitive verb and ditransitive structures start early on in acquisition, around 2 years of age, we have, let's say, later, in a sense, results on the comprehension of known verbs, where sensitivities to the structure starts solidly being tested around 3 years of age, and even more mixed results on the comprehension of novel verbs. Here, quite mixed and contradictory results have been obtained on English 3 to 4 years old, which of course is kind of an odd result, given that at that age, children are already used ditransitive verbs. So we decided to focus once more on that, trying to develop a paradigm that was simple enough to, let's say, not to underestimate the linguistic capacities of children. So basically what we did was to develop a preferential looking paradigm implemented via eye tracking, following the dialogic model by Yuan and Fisher. So simply we developed a dialogue phase in which 2 speakers introduce a novel verb, dase, either in ditransitive sentences or in transitive sentences construed in the way that I... sorry? What is happening? Okay. Sorry, something happened? Okay. Okay, sorry. So I was saying either in, so another verb, either in ditransitive sentences or in transitive sentences with 2 objects. And after this kind of dialogue, we proposed a test phase in which a transfer video was contrasted to a causative video, and we asked our participant to find the action of dazing. So we tested this kind of paradigm on 38 French toddlers, equally divided by condition. On average, they were 30-month-olds. But actually, before jumping to the results we collected of them, I'd like to give you a little bit more detailed idea of what our participants saw during our task. So in the dialogue phase, toddlers were assigned either to a ditransitive or to a transitive condition. In each, let's say, in both conditions, they heard 8 sentences per dialogue, and there was 1 instance of the novel verb within each sentence. Sentences were extremely similar among conditions, but they differ for a crucial feature, in fact, for a crucial word. So I let you listen to a sample of the original stimuli in French, and then I will comment upon them.
Tu sais quoi? Tu sais
Le
quoi?
garçon va daser la poupée à la fille.
Hey! Tu sais quoi? Tu sais quoi?
Le garçon va daser la poupée et la fille.
So as you can hear, that's a very minimal difference, but for a mature speaker, it should give access to a different interpretation. In the ditransitive condition, the preposition a, to, should communicate a meaning of transfer, since it's a ditransitive structure, while in the transitive case, the operator a and should disrupt that interpretation and rather bias toward transitivity and so a meaning of causation. So after this kind of habituation, we went on by verifying what toddlers have understood from our dialogue. So first we previewed via 2 brief inspection periods our visual stimuli. On one side, the transfer video, so 3 characters all engaged but with different roles in a transfer action. On the other side, a causative video, still 3 characters, but only 2 actually engaging as agent and patient in a causative action, while the third one just stayed there as a bystander. After that, we clear the screen, and only against a fixation point, we repeated for the first time outside the dialogue our novel verb, this time in a neutral frame, just saying something like, wow, look, somebody will does. And then the proposed test trial started, and there we basically just replayed our 2 videos, the transfer and the causative one, while asking twice more to find the action of dazing. So we concentrated our analysis on this very last part, the 2 test trials that were proposed to participants, but let's say bear in mind for the interpretation of results that once, let's say when the test trial started, children had just reheard a first repetition of the novel verb against only a fixation point. So in a sense, they were already processing that verb. So I will present the results in terms of looking proportion. On the y-axis, you will have the proportion of looks toward the transfer action. So 1 means all gazes to the transfer video, 0 means all gazes to the causative video. And I will show them analyzed via a cluster-based permutation analysis. On the x, of course, you have time, and the vertical black line that you see there is the beginning of the test trial. So what our results show is that, as it's fairly common in this kind of experiment, children did have idiosyncratic preferences in given moments for one video or the other. At the beginning, for instance, both groups prefer to look at the causative video. In the second part, they all prefer to look at the transfer video. However, our cluster-based analysis revealed an early window in time, starting around 500 milliseconds and going on for 2 seconds, more or less, in which the 2 groups were behaving differently, and they were behaving exactly in the direction that we predicted if they were correctly processing the syntactic information we gave them. So what is happening here is that toddlers in the ditransitive condition, so the red line, are looking more to the transfer video than toddlers in the transitive condition, the blue line. Toddlers in the transitive condition are, sorry, I don't know why this keeps happening, okay, are looking more to the causative video, which, as a matter of fact, is the target video in a sense for the kind of habituation that they have received. You may notice that this effect is indeed an early effect, and it actually occurs before the first repetition of the target verb dase within the trial, but you must also consider that just before the beginning of the trial, children already heard a sentence like, wow, somebody will does. So it actually makes sense that their preference is quite early, and then it got lost, in a sense, in time. So what can we conclude from our results? Our results suggest that at 30 months, French toddlers do know the difference between functional words, such as the preposition a and the operator a, because they were behaving differently, and this was the only linguistic piece that was actually differing among our condition, and that moreover that they can use those words in order to access the current syntactic structure for a sentence, therefore making guesses about the meaning of novel verbs that are found within that sentence. So going a little bit more big picture, these results seem to suggest that at least in this developmental stage, toddlers can effectively go beyond the strategy of counting the number of nouns in a sentence. Counting the number of nouns was not actually an helpful cue in our task. We always had 3 nouns and 3 participants on the scene. So rather, what they seem to be doing is to map a syntactic position to semantic roles, and moreover to do so in ditransitive frames, which is kind of a novel result in the literature, because, as I said, results have actually been quite mixed on much older children when dealing with ditransitive syntax. So all in all, we may say that our results suggest that grammatical and thematic content, rather than exclusively number matching, seems to be the driving engine that drive our learning through the lens of syntactic bootstrapping. So I thank you all very much for your attention. I would like to dedicate a special thanks to my collaborators in this project, as well as, of course, to our founding institution. And thanks again for having me.
We have time for questions.
Yeah, fascinating talk. I'm Hungarian, so it's more a comment than a question. It would be very interesting to see, because you were telling at the end that children are sensitive to the grammatical function words too, to do similar studies on case marking languages like Slavic or Hungarian and whatever, because we have combined the free word order of the participants combined with the case marking for second and indirect objects. So it would be very interesting to use the same videos and so on.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this comment. It would be actually super interesting, also because it is not, let's say, to be excluded that cross-linguistic differences may play a role, in particular with respect to the, let's say, ambiguity or lack of ambiguity with respect to how a language vehiculates a given syntactic property. It is not to be excluded among the many reasons, that's not possibly the only one, but it is not to be excluded that, for instance, the mixed results that have been obtained in English have also to do with the fact that English has two alternating structures in order to signal the transitivity, while French hasn't. Of course, there maybe different ways to vehiculate the, let's say, you can apply syntactic transformation and everything, but the base structure is only one. So it would be definitely very insightful to, let's say, see different languages, their different strategies, but also how many strategies, in a sense, there is in a single language in order to vehiculate a very similar semantic concept. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise this issue as a question, but I wasn't sure how much this experiment is about specifically thematic roles as opposed to a strategy of counting the possible fillers slots of a verb. So is it possible to solve it? It's still very interesting if it's about that, but is it possible that it's not much to do with thematic roles per se?
Thanks a lot for the question. It's very insightful. Of course, you're right. I mean, we can't be sure exactly about what we are tracking. However, we may say that if you think about the structure of the, maybe I may be able to recover them, the structure of the stimuli, and then with, let's say, the structure of the dialogue with respect to the structure of the visual stimuli in the test phase. In both conditions, actually, children heard free nouns, so they could think that there are free slots, as you said, to be filled with respect to the verb. But then, when they are proposed, well, they are presented with videos that all have free characters, they, let's say, they prefer to look at one video or the other where free characters are interacting in a transfer fashion or they are not interacting in the same fashion, basing on the specific linguistic materials that was used. So to the fact that in one case there was a preposition, in the other case there was not a preposition. If, in a sense, what children are processing is just the number of filler slots that go with a verb and they do not have access to what to or and construe in terms of syntactic structure, then may be brought to think that in both cases there are actually free slots to fill, and so both conditions actually refer to transfer.
Just a quick follow-up. I would consider a slot to be possible to fill with a list. So in this sense, just the number of nouns does not necessarily need to correspond to the number of slots. But it still doesn't change the fact that they are doing this somehow slot allocation to these verbs, possibly. I'm just not sure if this is specifically about thematic roles, but it's not a big problem.
Sorry, I get your point, and you're right. Of course, the way of conceptualizing, in a sense, the kind of the kind of relation that we are accessing may be different. What I think also your question highlights is that still is some kind of linguistic conceptual mapping, in a sense. It's a mapping between what is presented in the linguistic input and what is there in the conceptual reconstruction of the verbal eventuality. But of course, then, let's say, details can differ. Thanks.
That's all the time we have, so let's thank our speaker.